Grab your calendars, Wargamers. Today, we're going to talk about how tracking time in your campaign in a slightly different way is one of those winning secrets that can lead you to elite level play. Because these videos are sometimes controversial, we're filming at the ocean with a lovely sunset in the distance. There's there he goes. There's a sailboat just disappearing off the side, and of course, we've got the soothing sounds of the surf to keep us company and help us maintain our chill vibe. Oh, and we got a power plant over there to keep us company too. At any rate, let me cut right to the chase. You're tracking time in your campaign wrong. Let me tell you how most RPGs these days track time. You sit down at the table with your bros, and you play the game, and then, when it's time to stop the game, you stop. No more. Pause. We'll pick up the campaign right where we left off, and I'm here to tell you, that's the wrong way to play. People have been doing it that way for almost 40 years. That's not the way it was done initially. That's not the way you should be doing it now. Not if you want to play at an elite level. The way you should be playing now, this fundamental change in how you track time is a deep and profound mindset change, and it will change the way you approach RPGs. Here's the trick. This one simple trick, this one weird trick, it's called one-to-one time. And the way it works is this. For every day that passes in the real world, one day passes in the campaign world. Let me say that again, because some people get very confused when you talk about one-to-one time. It doesn't mean that you're gaming in real time. No. Au contraire, mon internet frère. What it means is, when you're not sitting at the table, for every day that passes in the real world, one day passes in the campaign world. This little rule, this little change, will radically alter your gaming paradigm. Before we talk about how and why, let's talk about what that looks like in practice. And to do that, I'm going to break out my own wargaming notebook, my journal, if you will, and show you the little campaign valley that I am planning to run you guys through. Take a look. This is Hintervale, and we got a series of points of interest to look at. And each one of these points of interest is perhaps a dungeon. It's about a week away, right? This is how it works in AD&D. By the way, we're going to talk a lot about AD&D because it's the original Mamma Jamma, the big humdinger, the king that started it all. And almost immediately, people looked at AD&D and said, oh, wow, this looks hard. I can't do this. And they wound up causing themselves a lot of problems that we have spent the last 40 years trying to resolve that disappear if you adopt the one-to-one timekeeping. So here's how it works in practice. We sit down, and Mr. Wargaming is going to be the DM in this example. And he says, where do you want to go? And you say, my Fred the Barbarian and his party are going to go to dungeon number 1. It's about a week, according to the DMG, the Dungeon Master's Guide, written by the great Gary Gygax. Typical delve is going to be about a week. So you say, okay, look, it's the first of the month. Saturday night. We game every Saturday. I'm going to go explore this dungeon. And then we go explore it. And I got hurt. So it's going to take me 4 days, right? Remember that healing rates in this particular game are 1 hit point per day. Okay, so that means I'm going to be laid up for the next 4 days. Fine. But we're only halfway through the night. Can I go back and take a second shot? Yeah, absolutely you can. So it was 7 days for the first delve, and then 4 days to heal, so now it's the 11th, and then it's another week for the second delve, and now it's the 18th, and you took a couple of points of damage, and so you call it 2 points of damage, so now it's going to be the 20th before you're fully healed. All right, great. That was a great session. We close the books. We'll get together next Saturday. So now it's Saturday the 8th, and you say, Fred the Barbarian is going to go check out Dungeon 2. And I say, no, you can't do that. Fred is still on his first delve. That character will not be available until the 21st. You got to take a couple of weeks off. Now, to the average gamer, this is a problem that is unacceptable. I have crawled into the head of Fred the Barbarian, and Fred the Barbarian is all I can handle. In fact, something as simple as a henchman or two is just way too much for me. Let's just throw out that rule and just advance the clock by 3 weeks so I can use Fred. That's the traditional way. One-to-one gaming says, oh man, you know what, that's right. Not only is Fred on this delve, okay, so what I'll have to do is, and here's the big mind shift, change. You don't say, oh, I have a problem, just ignore the rule. You say, now what do I do? What are the ramifications of this rule? How do I overcome this challenge? And the obvious answer is, well, I'll roll up a new character, and now Joe, the magic user, is going to take a week, and he's going to go explore dungeon number 2. Well, maybe dungeon number 2 is a wizard's tower, and Joe says, hey, wizard, I need, and he's a friendly wizard. He says, hey, look, I need you to do me a favor, Joe the wizard. Go over to here and beat up those goblins and come back. And you say, oh, that was about a week to do that. And then I went over and it was a week to do this. And, oh, I took some damage. It's going to be another week. Well, now by the time we come back for that third session, Fred is available. Right? So what you do is you put him in stasis and then you just say, look, he's not available until our real world calendar catches up. That's how this works in practice. And one of the ways you might go about this is to say, well, okay, so Fred was hurt, but my henchman was not. So I'll just play my henchman as a player character this week. And then he can always fade back to NPC status. Oh, we get a siren here. Let me pause it for 1 second. All right, a little quieter now. So fans of the channel will know what this looks like because we ran a campaign, a Black Powder campaign called The First Elopation War, in which we had a character named Red-Handed Helen who was responsible for this big war and ran off, and she started off as an NPC, and then she became a central prize in a battle, and now she's upgraded to the next scenario in this campaign is going to be her running around with the pirates. But the other thing that happens is, what if this magic user that Joe the magic user ran into, this wizard said, hey, Joe, I need you to do me a favor. Run up to these goblins and talk to the Goblin King and tell him that somebody's beaten up his boys over in this first dungeon. Now, you and I know that's Fred the Barbarian. In fact, the player knows that Joe the magic user now has a choice to make. And a difficult one, which is a challenge, which is part of the fun of this hobby. Do I work for this wizard who will give me a spell that I really want to learn? Well, now this wizard is, this magic user, Joe, is working at cross purposes to Fred, isn't he? And this is why this is considered elite level play. Because you've got a situation where you've got multiple NPCs that are working at cross purposes to each other. This is not a problem to be overcome. This is an opportunity to be embraced. Fundamentally, this is no different from what we do in campaigns such as the White Queen's War. Here, let me whip out that map, where we had multiple generals working at cross purposes to each other, even in some cases, generals on the same side of an army. What you have done by implementing this one-to-one timekeeping is you have moved away from the, I don't know what you would call it, the spotlight version of D&D, where there's one thread running through the campaign, one story that you're trying to tell, and you've moved it into a different paradigm. You've moved it into a story that evolves organically and that has multiple factions that are working against each other. One of the other great opportunities that this presents to you as a player is the opportunity to take on the role of NPCs. It puts a lot of the creative power into the hands of the players, not the characters, the players. It takes that struggle off the shoulders of the DM. Now, you may be the kind of DM that has a story to tell, and you know how you want that story to go, and by God, those players better stick to your story or they're going to be in trouble. We call this railroading, but there is also the soft railroad of, look, I've only prepared a little bit of stuff here. You got to stick to the portion of the world that I've prepared. No. That is basic level play. Those kind of guys should be off writing short stories and submitting them to wonderful, short story markets like Story Hack or Kursova Magazine. Fantastic magazines, by the way. If you haven't read them, pick up a copy. They got some really good stuff in it. The point is that this one-to-one timekeeping empowers the players to take on some of the onus of the world building and the world management. That's a good thing. Now, let me talk about a couple of the objections that arise whenever you talk about this new old style of role-playing. The first one and most common is, what happens if I'm stuck in the dungeon at the end of the session? It's 10 o'clock. I got to get home. I got to get the kids to bed. Now what am I supposed to do? Okay, you still got the wrong mindset. You have asked the wrong question. The question is not what happens if I fail to get in, get the gold, and get out. The obvious answer is, well, you die. Your dude is gonna spend a week camped out in a hostile environment. And an environment that is hostile not just to him individually, but is hostile to the natural laws of physics. We talked about that in Chaotic Dungeon Design, a video that I'll put a link somewhere around here if I remember. The proper question is not, oh, what happens to me if? The question is, what do I do to prevent this situation from even occurring? You are no... So much for the soothing sounds of the surf and the squad cars and ambulances, huh? As I was saying, you are now an active participant in the game. You are planning around the challenges that one-to-one timekeeping presents. Overcoming those challenges will make you a better gamer. Overcoming those challenges is elite level play. And if you're comfortable playing at the regular tier, that's fine. You don't have to implement this. But the objection, well, but what if I lose, is not the right question. The question is, how do I ensure that I don't? Another objection that is often raised to this one-to-one timekeeping is that as players, you don't have the opportunity to react to the plans of the NPCs, of the other factions, during what is called the downtime. This is when you're away from the table, that's called downtime. And typically what will happen is, at the end of the session, the DM will ask, what are you going to do in your downtime? And you may say, well, I'm going to go, poke around the thieves' quarter of the city and see what I can learn there. Or I'm going to spend this downtime, a druid, looking for a sacred grove somewhere out in the suburbs of the town. Wherever your village is, maybe I'm going to spend the week helping out the local farmers so that if I need to recruit more NPCs, I can do that. These are tasks that don't deserve time at the table, but are important for heroes to engage in order to balance the scales. Going back to the objection of, yeah, but the enemies don't have downtime. That week that we're away from the table means, A, the monsters are going to respawn, the dungeons are going to restock, and the factions that we have created through this new style of playing are going to be implementing plans of their own. That's not an objection, that is the game itself. Dealing with the ramifications of the choices you make is playing the game. And if you say, I don't want to deal with the ramifications of the choices I make, then why are you even making choices? Why are you here? This is another example of people who say, look, I tried to play the game and I didn't like it, so I wanted to do something else. Fine, but understand that you're doing something else. Let's just be honest in what we're doing, okay? So this new old mindset is a way of embracing the game for what it is, not trying to shove the square peg of storytelling into the round hole of a war game. There are, of course, other challenges and opportunities that arise from one-to-one timekeeping. I want to leave you with the words of the immortal Gary Gygax. I'll throw a graphic here on the screen. In the Dungeon Master's Guide on page 38, he admits timekeeping causes difficulties. It dictates who can and cannot go adventuring and dispenses player characters to the four winds by its strictures. All of these difficulties and all of these challenges enrich play and force you to stretch your muscles, to work your muscles and stretch your legs as a player. And if you can overcome these obstacles, you will improve. And Gygax himself says, time is yet another facet which helps to separate the superior players from the lesser ones. One of the biggest shifts that this concept makes in your head is that it now takes what happens in the game and it makes it directly impact you as the player. It limits your choices. And you are now bound by the strictures of time itself. This means that you have more invested in the game. And the more you invest in this game, the more you'll come to appreciate what is happening at the table. The richer your experience will be. So in conclusion, every day you're not at the table. I'm still not done concluding because you can actually implement this in any role-playing game. Just about any role-playing game at all can benefit from faction play that arises naturally out of, and the natural world, that naturally arises out of this concept of downtime and one day passing in the real world, one day passing in the campaign for every day that passes in the real world. You now, as a player, have a more vested interest in what happens in the strategies you make than you did before. When you could pause and you didn't have to think about it for a full week, you could walk away without suffering any effects. With one-to-one time, you cannot. It's an incentive for elite level play. And accepting that incentive is the first step on the road to becoming an elite level wargamer. There are other aspects, all of these tips and tools and new ways of thinking about RPGs that I'm giving you, they all rely on each other. They're a whole, and they support each other. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to structure your campaign to make it feel more authentic, and how to structure your gaming, and how to approach it by putting the proper things in the proper order. And it's going to be hard for people to accept that there are things that are more important than their Veruca Salt, but I want it, Daddy, and I want it now attitudes towards gaming. So we'll talk about that in the next episode. For now, just add this arrow to your quiver. One-to-one timekeeping can dramatically change the way you think about war games and RPGs, and you should strive to implement it, because that's the way to win at RPGs. I hope you'll come along with me. I hope you'll work out and get strong, become an elite level gamer with me, and on your journey to do so, I'm praying for you.